I visited the location and straight away realised that there were some very serious welfare issues with a number of the horses on the premises. Visually, straight away, I could see there was a dead horse in the field, and I could see some very, very underweight horses. Conditions in the field also didn't look great. At that point, I came away and made a phone call to make a plan to go back in as a multi-agency job. He was breeding quite a lot of horses, mostly for profit, some really quite well-bred horses, and he had two locations quite close to each other. One was the family farm and one was a yard that he rented. So he was breeding quite large numbers of horses, mostly from brood mares, mainly show jumping mares that were maybe for lameness reasons weren't able to be ridden anymore, so had become brood mares, some ex-race horses. Things had massively deteriorated to the point where things just weren't being done correctly, none of them were being fed enough, there was no proper worming programme in place, and you could clearly see that the situation was had declined rapidly. We just had to go in and get a vet to have a look at the horses immediately. We would normally work with owners, get them to get their own vets out, maybe work with them, see if they wanted to reduce some of the numbers, which would often mean maybe some of the horses being signed over to us to ease the burden. But this wasn't the case in this situation. Obviously I'd seen a number of horses at the location, but there was actually a lot more horses than I initially thought. I think I'd kind of estimated a maximum of 20. It turned out to be 41 horses and quite a lot of cattle at the location. The conditions for both the horses and the cattle was not good. We initially, on first going onto the farm, saw a group of horses in the stables at the bottom of the drive, and they were some of the worst ones really. They were extremely emaciated. One had a foal who was definitely the thinnest foal I've ever seen in my whole time working in welfare, that was actually still alive and stood on his feet. They immediately obviously needed the initial care from the vets. As we then progressed into the location, we realised there was a lot more horses out in the field. It was very wet, very cold, very muddy, and these are not hardy breeds that we were dealing with really. These are not, you know, your Cobs and your Shetlands, and these are all thoroughbreds, thoroughbred cross, warm blood cross. So mares that weren't going to do very well in the environment that they had. So we had a lot of issues with rain scald, mud fever, a lot of them had dental issues, but one of the main issues was the lack of a worming programme on the premises. So a lot of them had redworm and it had really dragged them down. So we had some with severe gut damage. Most of them either had youngsters with them or were in foal. So it meant that that 41 on coming away actually became a much bigger number, because a lot of the mares then started to foal once they were in a safe location and sort of had settled into their boarding yards. So on the day, obviously a vet assessed all of the horses at the location and felt that due to the state of some of the horses and the severe emaciation of quite a lot of the mares, that everything needed to come away from that location. And that was either because they were currently in a suffering state or very likely to suffer if circumstances didn't change. Transport was organised. We had our set of panels available, which were very generously donated by one of our members. So we used those to corral the horses into groups, particularly with the youngsters, because they weren't very well handled. So we were able to really safely load them with minimal stress, which was a really, really good example of multi-agency working on the day, because we didn't have a huge team, but everybody worked really, really hard. It was a very long day and we got everything away, which was the main thing. Upon removing the horses, they then all went to one boarding yard. A lot of them needed intensive care, a lot of dental issues, a lot of high worm counts, a lot of poor blood results. So from there, the horses stayed at the boarding yard for quite a long period of time under treatment. What normally happens at that point is either owners might sign them over, it may be that the courts award the ownership of the horses to the RSPCA and they can then rehome them from there. In our case, we actually took 7 of the horses from this job, as they came into Penny Farm several months after obviously being removed from the situation, and I'm really pleased to say that they are doing really, really well at Penny Farm. The farm have done a great job with them all, so they're currently undergoing their rehabilitation and hopefully they will all go on to be rehomed from here. So he would have been amongst a group of youngsters from the day. Yeah, so he'd have been one of the ones where you worry because they're so young and you think, you know, is this the best start to life for them? But yeah, he's done really well. As you can see, he's made a good recovery at Penny Farm. He's super cute. And it's really nice to see their characters coming out now as well more. I think now that they're back in at the farm and you're sort of spending a bit more time with them and they're all getting that one-to-one care that they need, their temperaments are all lovely and it's really come out the longer that they're here. So it's really nice for us to see as field officers, because obviously we do worry about them and you always want the best for any of the horses that you bring in. So it's great for me to see them all looking so good. I think for the 7 that came into us, the future's looking extremely bright. They are a really nice bunch. Obviously, they're of an age where we can now start working them. They're young enough to start the handling now, and then we will back them here at the farm, hopefully, and then hopefully they will all go on to have good careers from here. So the gentleman involved, the owner of the horses, he received a life ban on any equines, so he's not able to keep or participate in the ownership of horses at all now, which I think it's a really good result, and it would be the result that we would always be looking for in this situation, because what we don't want is another situation like this happening again in the future. So yeah, he received a suspended custodial sentence and a community order, and yeah, we were very pleased with the result of a life ban on equines. So this job again is a prime example of the work that we do, the numbers that are involved. Obviously it's the field officers that are going out to these jobs, it's the cost of the veterinary fees, it's all the cost of the rehabilitation of the horses once they come away. Without our supporters and without our members, we wouldn't be able to do any of the work that we do, so we're incredibly grateful. We don't receive any government funding, and we are out there doing the best that we can for these horses, often in very difficult situations with more and more multi-equine cases that seem to be happening at the moment.